Hello. In researching and studying Greek mythology for what I hope will be my next book, it's currently with the publisher under review. One of the topics that I looked at and thought about, although I didn't include this in not in the current draft of the book at any rate, is the concept of time. Kronos did get a mention in the book as entering into various other myths that are touched upon. Kronos is the god of time, but I should perhaps rephrase that a little as a god of a certain form of time, rather than time in a kind of all-encompassing sense. In that what Kronos is, and obviously to the ancient Greeks and many people today, Kronos is a real being. But obviously, if people are thinking with a more of a sort of a Jungian or some other psychological hat on, they might conceive of this more as an archetypal experience, a way of processing time, rather than as an actual independent deity. Kronos is what we would these days refer to more as linear time. So the measurement of time by units. Minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years, decades, centuries, etc., etc. It's not simply the way of measuring time by a kind of a fixed mathematical pattern, but it's a kind of a relentless form of time. So it's a time unrelated to anything particular that is happening. So whether the next 3 days are the most exciting 3 days of your entire life or the most boring 3 days of your entire life, it's still 3 days. The way in which you experience those days is neither here nor there to the passage of chronological time. As the hands on the clock tick past, it simply is. You could, to some extent, compare this to a different form of time, a different understanding of time, which is the god Caerus, a very minor god, but an interesting god nonetheless. And again, for the Greek mind, many modern-day polytheists, Caerus is an actual being, but others might take him more kind of metaphorically as a symbol of a way of experiencing time. So Kronos is often depicted as a very old man, the father time image with the great sickle coming through. Whereas Caerus is almost entirely depicted as a youth, and a very particular kind of youth in appearance. He's very fleet, sort of a fast running figure who is described as having a big forelock of hair but totally shaved at the back. A style that is a little unusual to think about, but I suppose goes in and out of fashions, that sort of thing, doesn't it? The idea referred to by Greek playwrights and poets and so on is that when Caerus is running towards you, you can reach out and grab the forelock of hair at the front, which I used to have once upon a time. But once he's gone, he's run past you, you've missed your opportunity. At the back there's nothing to grab onto. So you can only attain Caerus as he's coming towards you. You cannot attain him or pull him back or relive him, as it were, by dragging him back into your experience once he's gone. Because Caerus is much more the qualitative experience of time rather than the mathematical tick, 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 tick of the hands on a clock. So we will all have had this experience. I've had it. I'm sure everybody, both of you listening to this, will have had the experience where you're engaged in an activity and you're so engrossed in it, you're so in the zone, as sports psychologists like to talk about, that when you emerge out of that zone, you suddenly realise that 5 hours have gone past and you haven't even noticed it. It feels like you've only been doing the activity for 5 minutes, but a sizable chunk of time has passed without your conscious awareness of it, because you've been so engrossed, so in the moment, so living it. And the flip side of that is sometimes if you're sitting in the dentist waiting room or something, every minute feels like 3 hours as it drags past on the clock, and the kind of unpleasant experience of slow time when you wish things would hurry up and be over and done with because something horrible is going on, but it drags and it drags and it drags. Both of those in a sense are Kairos, because they're both about the qualitative nature of time. And the distinction between these is not just something that the ancient Greeks spoke about. It's appealed a great deal to a lot of Christian theologians and scholars, particularly people like Paul Tillich, who've kind of revived interest in these Greek concepts for a modern Christian audience. Because from a Christian point of view, Kairos is also kind of, in a sense, divine time, or this idea of things happening in the time that God, from a Christian perspective, wants them to happen. Obviously, you could put that in a polytheist perspective and say it's happening in the time when the gods, in the plural, want the event to happen. So the seed germinates when it's meant to germinate. The love of your life walks into your life at the right moment when he or she is meant to walk into your life, not to a fixed clock. So you can't say, well, you've got to turn up on Tuesday at 3 p.m. or else the person comes when they come, when it is meant to be. And the idea is with Kairos that it is meant to be. It's not just a sheer fluke by chance they happened to be there. They were meant to be there. And that kind of Christian notion that God is planning, if not absolutely everything necessarily that happens to a person, but is planning certain key events. And so when those events happen, they happen when they're meant to happen. And no amount of praying to God and egging him on and saying, oh, can't you make it now? Can't you make it tomorrow? Speed it up a bit, I'm bored waiting. None of that will change the time at which the event is meant to happen. So there is a season to events happening. And that seasonal element is also, again, an understanding of time. So quite a number of cultures have gone for developing calendrical systems, weeks and months and so on, ways of measuring the passage of time. And often, not all cultures, not all of them, but quite a few of them, especially modern day cultures, of course, have gone for what you might call a kind of a mathematical precision of time, in which the first day of the first month of the year happens because it happens, in a sense. It's just the next phase in the mathematical progression. So it's not geared into happening based around some event. Compare that to some cultures, some of the ancient cultures, where they would wait for certain key things to happen. So the month doesn't start until the moon is seen in its first sliver in the sky. The year doesn't start until the Nile floods, or the dog star Sirius is seen to rise in the sky. So people are waiting for an event, and when the event happens, that is a sign that the year begins, the month begins, whatever it is, the day begins. That idea that you're waiting for something external to you, the observer, to know that the time is now. Compared to a modern day calendar, January the 1st, it doesn't matter what phase the moon is in, it doesn't matter what the sun's doing, what the stars are doing. January the 1st is January the 1st. So it's not geared around the flooding of a river or anything like that. It just is the next date on the calendar. So boom, it's now January the 1st, it's now a brand new year, there you go. And that's the kind of the modern understanding of time, that time is this relentless mathematical force that trundles on around us, regardless of what is happening in our lives, what's happening in the cycles of nature. It's just boom, the next thing, the next day, the next week, the next month, it ticks over. That became arguably even more acute way past the period of the ancient Greeks, with the invention of trains, because with trains people needed timetables, and they needed timetables that married from one city to the next to the next to the next. So you couldn't just sort of have your lunch when you felt hungry, kind of thing, when you go for the rumbling in your stomach as an internal measure of when is it lunchtime. If the train was due to arrive at 12 noon, 12 noon had to be the same by everybody, not when locally people felt it must be about noonish now. All right, it is. Because obviously if you turn up at the train station because you feel it's about noon and only discover when you get there that the train left 25 minutes ago, it's quite annoying, very difficult to operate. So you need that sense with trains of standardised times where people can look at a watch, they can look at the clock tower, they can look at whatever sort of measurement of time they've got going and know that the train will arrive at so-and-so point in time. We'll avoid all the jokes about British Rail and the constant lateness of trains. Or British Rail is a bit out of date, isn't it? Whatever train companies and the constant lateness of trains. But in theory that led to an even greater kind of measurement of time, and that rolled out into things like employment. So the idea that you had to turn up at the office or the shop or the factory or wherever it was that you worked at a certain time on the clock, and you had to stay there, and you couldn't have your tea break until a certain time, and you couldn't leave off to go home until a certain time on the clock. So it wasn't simply arrive when it's light, go home when it's dark or something like that, a kind of measurement by some naturalised event. Rather it's this mathematical progression of time. And obviously if you've ever done a really boring job, you're sitting there watching the clock thinking, oh my god, how much longer do I have to sit here for? Another 20 minutes. You kind of ticks over, and that's Kronos time, that kind of dragging time. Or even if you're enjoying yourself, you think, oh god, I could, got to stop doing this in 15 minutes, and you would like to go and do it longer, but you know that when the clock reaches a certain point, boom, you're out the door. Again, that is good or bad, enjoyable or disagreeable. That is Kronos time, the measurement of mathematical units, when it kind of ticks along, compared to this notion of the qualitative nature of Caerus-time, of vitality of time. The word Caerus-time is also linked to archery. Caerus, the moment the archer releases the string and the arrow zooms off, which I find quite fascinating, because hamartia, the root word for sin, is also linked to archery. So this recurrence of archery in theological language is quite intriguing, and something if I ever get the time, I'd like to look into and see how many other archery terms have made their way into theology and philosophy and other such areas. But it's waiting for the right time rather than the clock time. So you do it when it feels right in here, not when the hand reaches a certain point on the clock. You could say, I suppose, a lot of gardening is like that. It's sowing when you see your seeds, and harvesting if you're a farmer or a market gardener or whatever, you're harvesting your crop when the environmental conditions are right, not when there is a very specific point on the calendar. It's so and so day, we better go and do this. It's so and so time on the clock, we better go and do that. Rather, you're looking at the environment. Are the conditions right? Is it appropriate? We'll do with the planting, the reaping, whatever it is, we'll do it now rather than in another week or another month. We'll do it now, because now the time is correct. It's in place. And so we could say there's this sort of tension between the society. Pretty much everybody these days, wherever you are in the world, pretty much everybody lives in a world governed by the clock, where this linear progression of time determines what we do and when we do it and all the rest of it, compared to that qualitative internal experience of right time. And equally, you could say, of course, by implication, wrong time, because not only is it important to sense when the right time is, it's equally important to sense it's the wrong time. No, we shouldn't do this yet, it's not right now. We need to wait a bit longer, then maybe it will be right tomorrow, next week, next month. So it's that sort of reading of time as a progression of opportune moments. So when the young god Caerus runs towards you, you grab his forelock and you seize the moment, and whatever is meant to be comes into existence because you've seized the opportunity. You're at the right place at the right time, and the job offer, the romantic awakening, the spiritual insight, whatever it may be, the thing that society, or the world, not society, the thing that the world was trying to push to happen, you were there, you did what you needed to do to seize the forelock of Caerus, and it's happened, as opposed to you turning up 3 days late. It's all over and done with, and somebody else drew the winning lottery ticket or did whatever they did, and your moment has gone past, and you live with the, well, I suppose the lack of consequences, because whatever was meant to be hasn't happened. Therefore, you kind of live with the nothingness of it not happening afterwards, which is a bit of a sad thought, isn't it? That if there are certain things that are meant to be, and if you miss your boat, there won't be a second winning lottery ticket, there won't be a second love of your life walking through the door, there won't be a second cure for the dangerous disease or whatever it may be, because you missed the boat. You arrived too late, you were too busy doing some other stupid bloody thing, and that golden opportunity of Caerus running towards you, well, he's run on. Maybe somebody else has grasped the moment because you weren't there to do it. That's a bit of a grim thought, and I'm sure most of us would hope that if we have missed the boat on some, whatever the thing is, a romance, a job, a lottery ticket, whatever it may be, that we might be offered a second chance later, that it is not a kind of one-time offer, do it now or screw you sort of thing. But maybe sometimes it is, and nobody said that life has to be evenly distributed with opportunities, and maybe for some things in life, either you're there for it or you're not. A bit like seeing a comet pass by. If you weren't there to see it, then it's another 365 years before whoever's alive then will get the chance to see it. Your opportunity to see that astronomical phenomenon has been, gone, and is lost, and tough tits. You've missed it. Such is life. But there we go. That's a short ramble on this notion of experiential time, Caerus, compared to chronological time, Kronos, and how it understands it. Of course, just before completely finishing, the idea in Greek myth, which is something I looked at in writing the most recent book manuscript, is that Kronos is a devouring beast in the story, of course. He eats his own children because he fears that they will rise up against him. They're just going to beg the question, well, why have children in the first place? If you are scared that they're going to overthrow you and get rid of you, rather than eating them, wouldn't it be better just not to conceive them to start with? But perhaps he was a randy god and nobody had invented contraception back in his day and age. So they have the children and he devours them. And it's a very odd myth, this idea of a father devouring their children. And people often say, well, what on earth does that mean? And how are we meant to understand this story? If we take Kronos as calendrical time, every minute that the clock ticks past, as the hand goes round the dial, is a minute less we will be alive. It's taking us, if you want to put it in such morbid terms, taking us a minute closer to the grave. It's one less minute, one less hour, one less week, one less month in which we can do things. And so the kind of calendrical time sort of eats our lives in a sense. It measures the finite nature of our existence in this body. If you believe in reincarnation, it's a different picture, but even if you do, the duration in which each body will be around is finite when all is said and done, unless you become a vampire. The time is ticking away, but also more metaphorically. Of course, if we are in the kinds of situations in our life where a dreary job, an awful marriage, or whatever it may be, or just sheer loneliness, which is a common enough complaint these days, we might be clock watching, in the sense that we are acutely aware of time ticking away, and we're not doing whatever it is we would like to do because we're too busy in this boring job or rotten marriage or sitting at home twiddling our thumbs wondering what on earth to do with ourselves, that we don't have that joyful quality of life, and we feel the sands in the hourglass running away, taking our opportunities, taking our Caerus away with the ticking of the clock. And there is a sense in which something I've often struggled to get my head around, the notion of whether it is sometimes too late. So one of the I suppose side issues or consequences rather of lecturing amongst other subjects in criminology is that I have to read about a lot of crime. Unsurprisingly, that one. And the things humans do to each other are beyond vile. I mean, every single time you think people could not possibly get worse than this, you find out about another crime, and they do. They somehow manage to scrape through that barrel into the grime underneath and go deeper and deeper and deeper and do worse and worse and worse and worse things. And there are days when I kind of wish I could press a button on the side of my head and wipe out the knowledge of some of the real life crimes I've read about, because they are just so awful, the things that people have done to each other, to random strangers, to their own kids, to the litany goes on and on and on of dreadful things that people do. Well, I'll get to the point. A couple of cases I've read about recently have involved children being horrifically abused, in most cases by their own parents, occasionally by employees at orphanages and places like that, but mainly their own parents. And at some point being rescued, but not early. In the abuse has gone on for years and years and years before the rescue has taken place, and they've come to the light of authorities, and they've been taken away from the people who've been raping them and starving them and knocking the seven shades out of them and what have you. And for me, I've often felt myself, not just these recent cases I've been looking at, but things like this in the past that I've read about or encountered people who have lived through experiences like that, wondered, is it too late? If you've got to the age of 10, 12, 15, whatever, of horrific, unspeakable abuse, and then somebody takes you out of that situation, and hopefully you're put with people, foster carers, whoever it may be, who are very nice to you, is that niceness too late, in a sense? So after maybe 95% of your life lived on Earth by that age has been spent in horrors, and then you get 5% kindness from whoever, is it too late to reverse the horrors? Well, you can't reverse the horrors, can you? But to heal the harm done? Or does that person go through the rest of their life mentally, emotionally, as well as often physically scarred because most of their childhood went in suffering rather than that tiny little sliver of kindness at the end. And of course, there are adults in a similar situation as well as kids, people who are stuck in horrendous situations where they're abused and tormented and vile things are done to them, and it one day ends, and hopefully after it ends that nice things start happening to that person. But let's say you, as one particular case I read about, you get rescued from your horrors, you experience a couple of years of niceness and then die. So most of your life has been suffering, and there's that tiny little bit at the end of niceness and kindness and goodness and decency. Was it enough? Not to say they shouldn't have had it, because of course everyone deserves, well, theoretically, everyone deserves goodness and kindness and decency. But if it was only a little bit right at the end, and then boom, that person's died from whatever causes, part of me thinks in that kind of passage of the two periods of time, the stretch of time of terrible suffering versus the period of time of joy and happiness and relief. So you've got these two phases being weighed up with each other. Whether that little bit of goodness can truly make someone's compensate, I suppose that's the word I'm looking for, compensate for the amount of misery and suffering that person has been through. To get that goodness so far, so late in life, or in the jury, I don't mean to say that they are very elderly, they might be still quite young, but turns out they're not going to live much longer anyway, perhaps in some cases because of the injuries that have been done to them and all sorts of things like that. The opportunity is seized, coming back to Caerus. The opportunity is seized, taken, they are moved into a good phase, but that good phase is very short-lived. That's probably not wholly within this remit of talking about Kronos versus Caerus, but it's something I never quite get my head around, this idea that is it sufficient, is it enough? If somebody had 10 years of misery and then 20 years of joy, that makes balance to me. But if it's 20 years of misery and 10 days of joy, is the bit of light at the end of the tunnel sufficient? And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Maybe some of you might have opinions on that one. And I suppose if they are dead, there's bugger all you can do about it anyway, whether it was enough or not enough. It's done is done. But that, I suppose that kind of mental reckoning, there's that what the Egyptians think of as mayat, that the balance, the evaluation of the good versus the bad. Difficult one. Anyway, so we'll leave it there, that notion of the passage of time and how we experience it, and how it is embodied in deities within Greek myth, and other cultures doubtless have comparable deities that embody the notion of time there. But just something to think about and mull over, it might spark a conversation or two.